Today I'm going to be showing you how to replace one of the blades. The basic steps to do this are going to be powering down your machine, detaching the two cables from the bandsaw motor, then detensioning the bandsaw blade, and then we will loosen these 4 screws that attach the frame to the base frame. Afterwards, we will be able to separate these 2 plates, remove the blade over everything, and then put in a fresh blade. To detension the blade, just move this lever all the way clockwise. In order to pass this blade over the electronics box, we will have to detach these 2 motor cables. Just spin the metal collar while pulling back on the plug. So to remove these bolts, use the included 5mm Allen wrench and a 13mm socket head. To remove your nuts, and you might find that these nuts are a little bit tight, and that is due to potential compression between this plate and the trough itself. And so to remove these nuts easily, I recommend having a person push against the trough and pull against the base frame while you extract the bolts. Wiggle it a little bit, Max. There we go. The bottom ones tend to be a little better. Okay. Right now, the frame is not at risk of falling because it is resting on this lip down here. If you lift up the trough so that it is no longer resting on this lip, it will want to pivot down, so be careful that you always let it rest back again in this lip. Before removing the blade, make sure to safely route your 2 motor cables up on top of the electronics box, as well as the main power cable. This will ensure that they're out of the way of the blade and they do not get damaged as we remove the blade. Okay, so first step after you've detensioned the blade is to remove it off of the wheels. And now you'll see that it is loose. And the basic idea of what we have to do is pass it over the electronics box and then through a gap that I will lift to separate here. And then I just put the trough back onto the leg and you've removed the blade. Now that you have removed the old blade, you can put in your fresh blade. To do that, you just want to make sure that the blade is initially oriented the correct way. So that is with the cutting edge that you can see sharpened. You can see the sharpening bevel to determine what side is the cutting edge. That needs to be facing the touchscreen menu. So first step will be lift up the trough, pass the lower edge of the blade through the gap that is created by lifting the trough. Replace the trough, loop it up and over the electronics box, and then seat it back onto your bandsaw frame. After initially putting the blade back onto the wheel assembly, before you tension the blade, you need to make sure that the blade is seated correctly. So you can see here that there is a piece of blade hanging off the wheel, and this is not properly seated. To properly seat the blade, you want to make sure that there is effectively no blade hanging off the edge, and it looks like that. And we can check the upper wheel as well. Make sure that the upper wheel is properly seated. There we go. Now we're good to tension it. And I like to hand feed the blade gently a few times, just to make sure that the blade is staying seated on the wheels. After I see that it's seated well, moving it by hand, I usually come to this bottom wheel and I give it a few higher speed spins just to make sure that it stays seated. If you see the blade beginning to work its way off of the wheel in either direction, we recommend using this tensioner screw here to adjust the angle of the blade. So this tension screw moves this piece of aluminum, which pivot around these bearings. And then Max, if you shoot from this side, show. And that tension screw allows us to change the angle of the blade to ensure that it stays aligned for an extended period of time. So now that I've misaligned it, I'm going to show you the process for realigning this wheel. If your wheel is not correctly aligned, as you feed it, you'll see that it either starts moving too far into the bandsaw frame. As you can see here, it's rubbing on this screw, and that is applying friction. Or it'll want to work its way the opposite direction, which if I adjust the blade alignment the opposite way, we'll see that the wheel tries to pull the blade the opposite direction. So now watch. You see how quickly the wheel is wanting to pop off? You want to prevent that. So to prevent that, we have to align this wheel correctly using this black set screw on the back. So I'm going to reseat the blade.
I might put the camera down and help, because the other side is all messed up too. Do you want me to? Or?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
All right, so now this is kind of trial and error, just until you can get the correct alignment on this. So I will make a few adjustments on this back screw and then hand feed a few times and see where is it going. So it's still rubbing on this screw here. So I'm going to adjust this a little more. Try again. Still not quite. Do a few more.
And are you going counterclockwise or clockwise when you're?
I'm going whichever direction gets me to equilibrium. So this is now staying on the wheel, but I don't like how much it's hanging off the edge. So I'm going to adjust it just a little bit more. I know it's close because the blade is staying seated on the drive wheel. That's going the wrong direction. There we go, just a little bit more. There we go. Now the wheel is staying fully seated on the bandsaw and this blade should be good to go. So to replace power and communication to the motors, identify the power cable, which is the cable that has 5 ports, and then identify the motor that, again, is going to have 5 connection ports. Line up the keyway, and you'll feel it click into position, and then tighten the metal shaft, push down on the plug, tighten again, push down on the plug and tighten just to make sure that it's fully waterproof, and then replace the communications cable, which has 8 ports. So identify on the motor which connector has 8 ports, line up the keyway, slide it on, tighten the metal collar, push down again, and then just ensure that the metal collar is fully tightened. And now the motors are fully connected to power and communication again. After you've reattached the blade and you have manually confirmed that it is running straight, I recommend running it in clean mode for a few minutes just to make sure that it is still tracking well. After you confirm that the blade is tracking well and it's not wanting to work its way off one side or the other side of the wheels, I recommend before doing any harvesting, just let it spin on the low speed for another few seconds just to further confirm that the blade is in a good position. So as we can see, the blade is tracking correctly on both wheels. So at this point, I think we're good to reassemble everything and begin harvesting.